Go down here, talking about castaways, deserters, refugees, and pirates. All right, remember who's the pirates and all that? It says here, there's no accurate measure of the number of shipwrecks along the South Atlantic coast and the Gulf of Mexico, but the number must be in the hundreds or even over 8,000. All right, over 8,000 shipwrecks, also not known as how many shipwrecked sailors and passengers survived in North America during the 1500s and 1600s, or how many Sephardic Jews, Muslim Moors, and European Protestants, who's the Protestants, same people, escaping the Spanish Inquisition, right? Protestants also being persecuted just like Moors and Sephardic Jews, right? Again, pick out my past videos. We know it's most likely the same people. They were the ones actually covertly, right, secretly being Christians, but they were actually practicing Sephardic Jews or Muslim Moors, really. And they were escaping the Spanish Inquisition, meaning the Catholics, landed on the shores of the present-day southeastern United States. So they're saying nobody really knows how many. So when historians try to tell you, oh, it wasn't that many, it's very insignificant, they don't know that. That's conjecture. Surviving archives, however, do furnish credible evidence of these people settling in the interior of the Southeast, while officially England was only colonizing the coastal regions. Now we're going to get into El Leon. It says here, San Miguel de Guadalupe colony. Now dodge the hijack on the whitewashed images, all right, with the body snatchers. In 1526, Lucas Vasquez de Ayllon, a wealthy Spanish sugar planter from Hispaniola. Remember, the Sephardic Jews were the ones in the Moors with the sugar plantations. Let's not just remember my past videos, nations of the world, and the Sephardic Dutch, and the Huguenots and all these people who were, setting up shop with the sugar plantations in Brazil and all over. Hispaniola personally financed a colonial expedition that contained over 600 colonists, all right? 600 colonists. This is in 1526. Remember, this is way before Roanoke. Historians currently believe that the colony was established on one of the islands at the mouth of the Altamaha River in Georgia, all right, with the Altamaha people. Ayllon either was not competent logistics planner, or he expected to steal what food he needed from neighboring indigenous villages, as was the practice farther south. However, the indigenous peoples along the coast were only part-time agriculturalists. Much of the flat terrain was unsuitable for agriculture, especially on the islands. That's here, while the village was under construction, the 80 Moorish prisoners of war, Moorish, meaning the Catholics had some indentured servants, some persecuted Moors, prisoners of war, not slaves from Africa. This doesn't mean slaves from Africa. These were the Sephardic Moorish people that had been expelled from Spain and Portugal. A lot of them ended up as prisoners of war, who were essentially slaves. They were considered slaves, right? But they were prisoners of war. Moors from Spain and Portugal became increasingly irritable and finally rebelled. Who's rebelling? Moors, not African slaves. Moors from Spain and Portugal. And yeah, Curimeo, but they still probably came from, no, they didn't. They were been in there for at least from 711 AD, right? That's almost 800 years in that area. And before so-called Moors from Africa got there, there was already Moors or people of dark complexion in Europe already. More and more war. Yeah, more war, yeah. Right, so they became increasingly irritable, and they rebelled. Apparently with the connivance of neighbor Indians, the Moors went AWOL. So they teamed up with the Indians, right? Who? The Moors. The Moors, not African slaves, the Moors. They were never seen or heard from again. What happened to these Moors that went AWOL, they said? What happened? They were never seen again. Maybe they mixed in with the Indians and became Indians too. Unlike in the Arawak culture, it was the custom of Muskogean provinces to be inclusive. Great sons often ruled over several ethnic groups. Bands of friendly strangers would be assigned to unoccupied lands and incorporated into the province. Therefore, it is quite likely that these Moors settled somewhere within the interior of Georgia and intermarried with the locals, right? Muskogeans originally had no concept of skin color-based racism. You understand what they're trying to say? They're trying to say that the Muscovians were a little lighter. That's why they're saying, because they accepted the Moors, but both people of color, right? Both people of color. That's why they blended right in. That's why they blended right in the Moors with the Muscovians. All right, this ain't me telling you. This is what I'm trying to tell you. You have two major genealogies. These original settlers, colonists, were colored people from Europe, and the indigenous populations that were already here for thousands since creation. Yeah, a true American. All right, so now we're in the book Jews and Muslims in British Colonial America, a genealogical history. All right, great book, a lot of good drop in here, telling us about who were the original colonists. Straight up, Elizabeth Hirschman and Donald Yates, the authors. All right, I'm in this part right here. It's talking about John White's, what he heard about the Spanish having established a mission before, the Roanoke colony. And this is what he says, William B. Quinlan, as a Virginian historian, writes that the documents record that 1 year after the exploration of the peninsula by Verrazano, remember what Verrazano said about the indigenous population here? He said they're like Ethiopians. Their complexion is like an Ethiopian. All of them. Some of them darker, he says. Lucas Vasquez de Leon, all right, a lawyer and judge of Santo Domingo, obtained a patent from King Carlos Quinto, right? Carlos of Spain, Carlos Quinto, the Swarthy man, Charles V. Yeah, Charles V was a so-called black man. Yeah, Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, Carlos Quinto, says he authorized him to explore and plan a settlement on the American mainland. It was in June 1526 that Leon set sail, right? Listen to this. This is way before Roanoke, way before. With 3 small vessels from Puerto de la Plata, Santo Domingo, accompanying him were 600 men, women, and children. With sufficient supplies and 150 horses, the Leon entered the Chesapeake Bay, which she named Madre de las Aguas, Mother of Waters, and ascending the Guandape, James River, landed at a place he calls St. Michael or San Miguel. St. Michael was the second colony attempted on the mainland of North America after the establishment by Ponce de Leon at Charlotte Harbor, Florida in 1521. The Leon soon died of fever, and the settlement passed through a deadly winter marked by plagues, Indian attacks, and a slave insurrection. Not soon afterwards, its savior, Francis Gomez, gathered together the survivors on 2 ships and sailed for Santo Domingo. Only 150 of the 600 original colonists ever reached safely. All right, so a lot of them stayed behind, right? That's what they were saying on the Axis genealogy, where we just came from. We don't know if they died or anything or what happened to them. They could have mixed in, all right? And that's what did happen a lot of the times. All right, so now we go to page 144. It says here, from France to the Carolinas. And it says, we have already mentioned of South Carolina's very early Sephardic Moorish history. South Carolina. Remember my South Carolina video? All right. So if you haven't watched that video, this is the one I'm talking about. It's the Sephardic Moorish, Morisco, free people of color, plantation owners of South Carolina, Huguenots, and servitude. All right, it's a great video. Make sure to get this video. As you can see, the book that we're reading right now, Using Muslims in British Colonial America, and some more information, other sources as well. Make sure to get that video if you haven't watched it before. And again, just want to remind you, everybody, if you're new, make sure to go back, try, to catch up on the information, to see what we have already researched and gone over, so we can surf the wave in real time together and go through the journey together. All right.